Welcome back to the Comfy Chairs, a podcast from 123 Limited. This is your host, Kate. I've worked in two distinct industries, retail and healthcare, and I've experienced the death of a grandparent in both. My mother's father had multiple cardiac events leading to his death during my time in retail management. Each time we left for a panicked drive to Illinois, I worried about my job. Taking time off with short notice, even for emergencies, was not looked upon favorably. When my father's mother passed a few years later, and as the only child, I needed to drive him to Illinois, I knew I would come back to my new HR job at the hospital with no problems, or, more importantly, no recrimination. The attitudes of my leaders and the culture of each organization had a significant impact on my experience as an employee and as a grieving grandchild. Work is work, but death is inevitable. Everyone is guaranteed to experience loss at some point, and loss means grief. So why do so many employers shy away from grief when we know it is a universal experience that will touch our employees' lives? Why are leaders not trained to handle bereavement head on? If we are going to make work better, and we must, then the ways we respond to loss in the workplace must evolve. My guest today is the CEO of Bereave, a company doing just that work. They provide practical resources and tools to improve workplace bereavement practices. Justin, welcome to the Comfy Chairs. Thank you for joining me. I like to take time for my guests to introduce themselves, so would you please do that?
Sure. Thanks, Kate, for having me, for allowing me to represent Bereave today. My name is Justin Clifford. I am a former second grade teacher turned salesperson, turned sales leader, turned first-time startup CEO here at Bereave. People ask me for intros. I often don't know what to say. Don't want to give a big, list off my resume. So I guess I'll say that I battle self-doubt. I'm getting better at asking for help. I love people see the greatness in themselves that they often can't see on their own. I'm a husband. I'm a father of two boys, 5 and 7, a son, a brother, and live in Indianapolis, Indiana, kind of the heart of Midwest.
Yeah, and fun fact, you went to college in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, UD.
Yep.
University of Dayton.
Yep, it's right down the hill. So
that's right.
I love you starting off with this very authentic and vulnerable moment, the self-doubt and wanting others to see the best in themselves, because our topic today is really about that kind of, here are the things that are in our core and that can be sore spots for people. And that's something, before we really dive in, I think it's important to acknowledge that in talking about grief, loss, death, that can be very difficult for some people.
Totally.
I know that because I am an awkward person, I sometimes am awkward in these circumstances. I also know that listeners may have their own experiences, recent or in their past, that can make this hard. And I don't want to gloss over that fact because of what it is we are discussing. And that the goal here is not to press on wounds, if you will. It is to explore and understand how workplaces can do this better for people. As work needs to keep changing, as we need to get better at how we lead workforces. One of the things we have to touch on is this absolute universal human experience.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm glad you said that, Kate. And I will tell you, you referenced yourself being awkward. I do this for a living. I have these conversations for a living. I'm awkward more times than I'm not.
Yeah.
Right. It can be tough. to try to feel like you need to say something specific or do something specific. And I think, we'll get into this, but I think that's often where we just get tripped up.
Yeah.
We're doers, we're fixers, we want to help, and those are all good things. It sometimes just comes out a little goofy.
Exactly. There's so many ways you can stick your foot in your mouth, and when people are facing loss, it's even easier somehow. Now, all of that said, I really believe the best way to approach these things is with humble conversation. We have to talk about grief if we're going to handle grief. Naming and facing things makes us better at it, but it's hard. Because you work in this space and you're talking about these things more often, I'm curious, just as a very kind of practical, here are some tips, here are some things that you have found to be effective. What would you share that you and your colleagues at Bereave, how you address the challenges associated with talking about grief?
Yeah. I mean, I'll kind of talk about this in two sections. One, just in life, and then two, at work. In life, there's so many dependencies, right? What's the relationship that you have with the person that you're talking about? How do you share your own? I like to think that if we display the types of behavior that we would want to see and just kind of model it, that can be helpful both personally and professionally. I have learned that saying nothing is okay in front of somebody, outside of saying something to the effect of, it's okay to sit here. I'll sit here with you. I'll be here with you. Do you want to talk about that? Do you want to talk about your person? Right? Using very similar language to what they use, right? Sometimes people say, my dad passed last week. And my response would be something to the effect of, I'm sorry to hear that your dad passed, right? Sometimes people say things like, my sister was killed 2 years ago. And I will kind of mirror that and say, I'm really sorry your sister was killed, right? So those are the things that I've learned from a lot of people and probably a lot of practice. So naming it like you referenced, offering an opportunity for people to talk about it. And the reason I think that is important is because we talk to so many people who have suffered a loss. What we have found is that it feels like more people would rather talk about their person and help preserve that memory and preserve those stories than not.
Yeah.
Right. So by offering an opportunity to do that, it can be a real opportunity to deepen a relationship, or just provide that person some really, maybe even necessary comfort on that particular day. Professionally, there are so many challenges associated in the workplace with talking about grief, but I think it sort of resembles, if you think back to like 2019, anybody that was in therapy blocked off their calendar, they put a hold on, the top and the bottom of their therapy and marked it as private, right? It was just this private mark, right? Then we rolled into 2020, and the next 2 years, the world is upside down. Companies are starting to talk about mental health. They're starting to provide mental health services. They're, whether it's an app or actual service, they're starting to say, hey, we understand that this is tough. Here are these things for you. They start talking about it. And when the workplace starts talking about it, it starts making it okay personally to talk about, right? So the workplace has a responsibility here if they want it. And, you talk, you open up somebody's calendar to see if they've got room for you now, and you see that it's wide open. They have therapy. They're probably talking about their therapy on LinkedIn. They're talking about it at coffee. They're talking about it with family, right? I feel like that is a very similar situation to talking about grief. Talking about other hardship at work. Society, I think, goes the direction that the workplace goes. The workplace makes it okay to talk about. Leaders invite the conversation in. they understand what's happening, and people become more comfortable talking about it, not just at work, but also outside of the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you've hit a couple of really important points. The fact that what's happening in our workplace and the connection to where our society is, and societal pressures as well, on the workplace, that we have to pay attention to what's leading what in those necessary changes. I also have to smile a little bit. It's a responsibility if they want it. Frankly, it is a responsibility, period. And if you choose to not take it on, there will be other consequences. Employers that aren't staying abreast, who say this is not my responsibility, okay, that's a choice. And
right.
If your retention rates are in the pits, if your productivity is impacted, it's because you chose other, I think. So I just think that's an important point. That
it's a great point.
Yeah,
it's a great point. There are consequences to those actions, and it's not just. And I think where companies start to and leaders start to sort of miss the mark is that they think about the griever themselves and how that person is treated, and they're thinking about it in a very singular lens. In fact, people are watching on how that person is treated. There are friends and there are ripple effects. And when the company shows up to really support somebody, to really pull them close and to say, we got you here, they see that too, right? So it's not just deepening the loyalty and the productivity probably of that person. Everybody else around them sees that and starts to develop deeper loyalty and starts to feel like, hey, I'm safe here.
I agree 100%. And I think it also begins to serve as a model for how we treat people across the board, not just during hardship, but when there are things to celebrate. Are we making space? Are we looking at what the individual needs? And I'm not advocating for like throwing out equitable treatment, but recognizing that each individual has different needs. And if we start at the baseline of where it hurts the most, in death and in loss, then there's this foundation that allows us to keep people safe, to create opportunity, to treat people as the individual contributors that they are. So it becomes a model. Bereavement practices I think they show in more ways than almost anything else, whether or not an employer really has care for their teams. Now, that's when we talk about bereavement in the workplace, it tends to be closely linked to policies. So there's the time off component and having structure to help people know how to respond, because you kind of do need what's my rubric for things, although rubric may not be the best way to talk about that. But so what I'm actually trying to get to is, if we want to talk about preparing leaders to respond better to grief, to have practices around bereavement, it's more than just a policy, obviously. So I'm curious, with your experience and your point of view, what are the structures, the supporting structures that can help leaders do their best? And then what are the mindsets and skills that we also need to foster? So there's a kind of the framework and the policies and all the ways the company operates when it comes to these events, and then leadership growth and expectations as well. Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to come back, before I go there, I'm going to come back to something that you said very specifically about, like, when we think about bereavement at work, we typically think about policy. What we hear over and over and over when we ask any business leader, right, whether they are a manager of people, frontline, second line, third line, a CEO, head of HR, when we ask, what does bereavement at work mean to you? What we typically hear, and I'm not saying this is anybody's fault, this is kind of how we've evolved,
what we typically hear is we have a policy.
Mm-hmm.
We give an 800 number and sometimes send flowers. We talk about eligibility in the policy, so everybody is really clear on, when they can take off and who
Mm-hmm.
they can take off for.
Yeah.
And that typically, and maybe they attend the funeral, maybe they send a meal, things like that. Things that we have started to refer to as random acts of bereavement.
Oh, that's horribly descriptive. Yeah.
Yeah. But it very much is. I think it sort of mirrors the discomfort,
Mm-hmm.
right? That people have. It's like, hey, let's push these people over here to this 800 number. Let's push them out of the office, but for just 3 days. And when they get back, let's make sure that they're moving pretty quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a ton of thought about that return to work. In reality, what bereavement at work should be is bereavement support. So taking bereavement leave, taking bereavement at work, and just turning it into bereavement support, right? Because we can talk about tactically all day. Like, we've got all sorts of lists and things like that we can help with, that we do help with. But thinking about it as mental health support, thinking about it as equity and inclusion, thinking about it as culture building, and really making it visible to who the company really is, right? It says a ton about a company and the way they react in times of crisis. So that's what we are helping try to move to, away from that, archaic policy plus flowers. And people say all the time, hey, we've got bereavement covered. We have that policy. Probably needs to be updated. We'll do that later. But we also send flowers, and sometimes we attend the funeral. So I think we're doing really well, right? So I'll pause a second. I want to get to the actual question, but I did want to make sure that we
No, I love it, because I think it's very important, and I'm going to follow this rabbit trail with you for a moment. One of the issues that I have seen, and I know exists with so many policies, is that they no longer model people's lived experiences. It is traditional nuclear families that are supported, if you will, or baked into the way those policies are created. It doesn't reflect modern family structures or social support. It doesn't take into consideration anything that would be considered quote unquote non-traditional. And that's deeply problematic. It really is. Even things like which family members are included can be so arbitrary and doesn't take into consideration the individual's family structure. As an only child, I don't have siblings, but I have aunts and uncles that are very important to me. And traditional policies, sorry about your luck.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Use your own time.
Yeah. And I think what you're starting to see, because this is I will say that we don't necessarily have a stance on how many days each person should get for a specific relationship, because of what you just said, right? There are modern family dynamics. I have an uncle who passed away several years ago, who I saw once a year for my entire life, and we were not close.
Yeah.
I also grew up with a guy whose uncle raised him. That uncle, based on policy, is treated the same way. Those two uncles are treated the same way, and they're vastly different relationships, right? So when I talk about things like equity and inclusion, like these are the things that start to pop up, right? Inclusivity beyond bloodlines, right? Including pets, including friends, or to get super crazy, don't include anybody. Let the employee dictate who they loved and how much they loved them, right? Because what the company does by saying, aunts get 3 days, cousins get 3 days, child gets 5 days. So you have a couple extra days for your kid, right? But they are effectively assigning a specific amount of love and a specific amount of grieving that they think a person should do based on that bloodline.
Sure.
And when you say it like that, when we say it like that, we see people's eyes open a little bit, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, right? So we're starting to see some emergence of things like empathy leaves or compassion leaves that are much broader, that don't just talk about grief and death. They also talk about other hardships in life, right? And they acknowledge that there are all sorts of hardships. And rather than have a policy for each one, they have an open policy. Cocoon, a leave management software company out of San Francisco, does a brilliant job at this. They have a 30-day rolling 365 30-day policy where they include basically whatever is going on in your life that you need to take, where you could say, hey, listen, I've got a court date. I've got some financial hardship. I got to work. You don't even have to tell them, right? You just do it, because that is the human part of this.
Well, here is the rub there, Justin. It's not just I am entrusting and empowering my employees to speak and advocate for themselves and their needs. We're also saying that leaders need to have discretion, and they need to have the confidence and the courage to make those decisions in partnership with the employee that has the need. And this is how we'll come back to this question of structure and competence, because a lot of managers are afraid to be the decision maker. Ironically, that's primarily their job, but there is fear associated with that. And I think policies have become so prescriptive as, frankly, as like a backstop for the fear that managers have.
I mean, I would almost, and I understand the problem that you're referencing here. I would almost remove the decision making from the manager in this point, right? This isn't a manager call. This is a business call. This is a cultural call that the business has established, right? And when you present a policy, you should also tell managers how to react to those policies, how to enact those policies. So rolling out a 30-day like Cocoon does, and you let the managers know, hey, when this happens, here's how you react, right? It's not your choice. Maybe some enable them to do that. I think it probably goes against the concept to some degree, but it's not necessarily your choice. But this is how these are the things that you can say. These are the things how you need to report back to us. But it kind of comes down to the way that the business enables those managers, right? I don't want to stray too far from the structural supports that you asked about, because there are several that are outside of policy.
And I just think those are important to get to, but there's also the mindsets, the culture that underpins it all is really the important thing. If you have the culture established, if you have this understanding that if we are really going to support whole people, complex, messy people in the workplace, then this has to be a consideration. The structures will naturally, for the most part, start to follow. I just think that there are so many good practices out there. Why wouldn't we do some sharing of the good bits? Because plenty of people can be interested. They can know that this could be better, but they don't necessarily have the know-how or the exposure to find different. So that's why I'm kind of fixating, because I think you and I are probably both more focused on what is the cultural norm or need that makes this part of how people do operations. So, but that's why I keep coming back to structure.
I'm with you. And I think about, and I think about the conversations that are happening at that leadership table, right? And if there is a question about who we are, like, just go to your website. Just go to your own website. Go to the careers page. Look at your core values, right? Are the policies aligned? And this is kind of getting back to the structural components here, but are the policies that we have aligned with who we are, who we say we are, right? I can't tell you the amount of horror stories that I have heard that one of the first things I do is I figure out what company it is, and I go straight to their website, and I want to see what they say about themselves on the
Mm-hmm.
website, and how mismatched so many of them are.
Yeah.
Right? They don't align with the core values. They don't align with really much that, when you hear stories like this. And part of that becomes like, maybe the manager had too much control, and maybe that was a manager thing. Right? Now we're talking about equity. Who's got the best
Mm-hmm.
manager to give me space? Right? But thinking about policies as they reflect the culture, making sure that they are consistent with the purpose of having a policy. We see all the time, you can have 90 days paid parental leave, but if that same child dies, you get 5 days unpaid.
Yeah.
I have seen that exact example over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Those aren't aligned. Right?
Yeah.
And stepping back and saying, hey, why do we have this really great policy, and thinking about the why behind it. I think a couple of the other structural supports here, manager training is one of them. You can train on empathy. You can train on having tough conversations, how to react in moments of crisis, what to do when a teammate shares bad news of some kind, right?
Mm-hmm.
I said the word empathy. I'm going to say it again, because empathy training is a real thing.
Yes.
One of our I'll call her advisors, one of our partners, one of our friends, her name is Lisa Mertez. She is an empathy at work coach, consultant. I've been through her programs. She has certainly helped me become a more empathetic person. I have a long way to go, but she helps companies
Mm-hmm.
and their managers become more empathetic, right? So take those types of trainings. And you asked about mindset specifically. I think that, and we're, this probably isn't going to be a surprise to you, but I have a belief that people perform their best and probably are most loyal when they feel taken care of,
Mm-hmm.
or when they see a company taking care of its employees, right? That reflects their core values, that reflects what's written on their website. So I think like those structural components, from the way you write the policy, the way you enable the managers, the way you train the managers, and then having that mindset that our people are actually what get this done.
Mm-hmm.
If we hire well, when we hire well, are probably three of the things that I think about the most.
Yeah. It's, we do have to talk we are discussing this in business context. And
Correct.
If you're going to keep the lights on and the doors open, there are business demands, of course. And that's where I think about manager discretion. If if I were to go to a boss and say, so this is actually a personal example, even as a self-employed person. Last summer, my 16-year-old cat died, and I freaking love this cat, and it took me out at the knees. It was not a good experience the way she passed. It was rough, and I had to take several days off. But where I was as a very, very new business owner, it set me back. And if objectively, if I could look at that, and obviously I couldn't then in the moment. You mentioned pets though, so this was kind of fresh on my mind. If I could have stepped back and had like, all right, there's my business owner hat and then my employed hat. What ill impact will the time I'm taking to grieve potentially have on my business? And how do I not dictate, but negotiate and arrange for the right time and place, right? And I'm not talking about you must demand that you return on this date, but it's taking the need and putting it into a business context so that you're not adversely impacting the work at the end of the day. And that is a fine line to walk. It's going to look different for every business, for every business unit, for every team. I I don't want to say like, oh, we'll just figure it out. But we do have to acknowledge that that's one of the things that leaders need to be trained on. And I think that's why talking about empathy and difficult conversations in this context is so important, so that you're creating that balance. So my soapbox, kind of platform or what have you, the thing that I'm trying to really frame out for the world is that we need to think about leadership as a love story, that it's caring for the people that work with and for you. And I know some people get a little anxious about love in the workplace.
Very squishy.
It can be. And, it's like, no, not romantic, not any of those.
Sure.
This is, I want the best for. Care is probably a cleaner way to talk about it, but it doesn't shake us up as much. So my stake in the ground, love.
Yeah.
If you are going to love the people that work for you, you have to balance the needs of the business more than any other time when there is loss. Like, this is the place where demonstrating love for your employees is most important. And I know I'm preaching to the choir on that. It just,
I love it.
Yeah, like I can't, this is in the business context, but this is about how we treat each other. And yes, leaders, you are pulled between the business goal and the people needs. But what will help you balance that is care and concern. Yeah. And so mindsets matter. If I am approaching this as I want the best for the employee, I want the best for the team, for our business outcomes, what is the best thing I can do? I think the mindset, that is the mindset that I advocate for. Yeah. Across the board.
And I think
especially.
Some people would answer that question. The best thing I can do is get that person out of here and backfill as quickly as possible. Like, that is the mindset of some business leaders, right? This is where a lot of like the every now and then we have to talk about the business case of what we do, right? Yeah. Right now, as a startup, our price point is so low that it doesn't even really come up. But which is great, and it will at some point. But when you think about that, like, think about even let's just say a B player on a sales team. Okay, and I'm going to go sales because that's my background.
Yeah.
A B player on a sales team was difficult to hire because finding A and B players are really tough to find, especially through an interview process. It takes a while. They join. They don't actually carry a full quota in most cases for somewhere between 6 and 12 months, probably, like, generally speaking. So that fully ramped B player, if you want to worry about even a month of them being out, because you probably give them more for parental leave anyway, right? So if you're thinking about them leaving and backfilling, you still have to hire, you still have to enable them, you still have to get them ramped up. Your management time is increasing with every new hire, right? That needs your extra time, right? So we could probably map this out on some sort of, quota spectrum spreadsheet type of thing. But any type of turnover becomes expensive towards your business targets.
Yes.
And knowing how significant the turnover risk is when somebody loses a loved one, you should have a plan for this, but B, you need to kind of pull out and think about this as a 12 to 18 month thing, and not just a 3 to 5 day window that you're going to be stretched thin a little bit.
Now, I think I've seen you share on LinkedIn some of the statistics about turnover as a result of the death of a loved one. Do you have those like ready to hand in your
Yeah.
head? Because I think
I
that'd be,
mean, yeah.
it's
Yeah.
powerful.
The most prominent one is, we were struggling to find anything of like, uh, of real substance around people leaving because of loss. There are all sorts of statistics out there from companies like 15Five, companies like humanresources.net that will tell you that certain people of a certain age are X% more likely to leave if they were faced with this like decision in this situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we did is that we went to LinkedIn just to see what would happen. We put out a poll on LinkedIn, asked one question: if you've experienced a loss, did you leave your company within 12 months?
Okay.
Okay. Tons of variables that you can drill down into here, right? But we just wanted to know, do people leave or do people stay? Turns out it's both. 51% of almost 500 people that replied to this left their company within 12 months. And Kate, I don't know if you've ever taken an exit interview, but I've taken a couple, and I've never been asked, did I suffer the loss of a loved one within the previous 12 months,
No.
right? So there is this leaky bucket. And when you think about how prevalent death is, and I don't think like I don't think people really understand how prevalent death is in America, right? Their workplace might not see it as much as another workplace. Their inner circle might not see it as much as another inner circle. But the data, if you just look at just core death rate in American workers, looking at the census, looking at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, looking at the CDC, and combining that data, 1 in 18 people, 1 in 18, okay, will lose a parent, a sibling, a spouse, or a child every year, right? 1 in 18. And those are profound in most cases, right? In most cases, those are profound losses.
Yeah.
If you add aunts and uncles, if you add a close friend, and if you add a grandparent, not even getting to pets yet, Kate, if you add just those, we're talking 1 in 9.
Yeah.
Okay. So just taking the law of averages and applying it to your workforce, what we end up hearing when we show people that is like, hey, well, that we don't have that amount here, which is fine. You might not. But also you start to learn about the culture, because people, in particular HR people that we talk to, say things like, I'm usually the last to find out, and it's usually a couple months later. Right? We got big other problem there, right?
Yeah.
That's a whole separate issue. But when you understand the prevalence of death in America, as it applies to the workforce specifically, and you understand that it is maybe not a cause, but certainly a correlation to so many people's departure, that you got to start thinking about this. And we are just talking about retention. We haven't even gotten into productivity yet.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
And just talking about retention.
Yeah. Well, that 51% is staggering. And again, we don't really have a lot of loss here. That tells me you don't know about the losses that people are going through. So we're talking a lot about employee loss right now. There's also the issue of, as a leader, when I experience loss.
Yes.
Because 1 in 9, right?
Yep.
It's going to happen as well. And there's obviously, does the culture support everything we've been talking about? And this is perhaps more on this is sloppy, but like the self-care side of things rather than the management leadership side of things. But integrating your own grief as a leader when you have to be at work, is that something that at Bereave that you're beginning to address? And what are you seeing as best practice?
Yeah. I don't I don't know specifically that, and I'm thinking here a second.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot that we talk about in terms of empathy and compassion and, of course, the data, grace, right? Those really squishy things for a CFO to
Yeah.
wrap their heads around. Um, I don't I don't think that we have necessarily applied that specifically to employees, right? I think we've applied that to the workforce.
Mm.
So the same way we might talk about, let's get back to the sales organization again to help me out here, but the same way you might work with an SDR who is new to their career at a technology company is really the same way you should be approaching a CEO,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Now, there's going to be nuance to the responsibilities of the job and who needs to cover what and how that's going to get covered. But it doesn't change the fact that we are talking about humans.
Yes.
Right. So and there's a lot of training in our platform. There's a lot of education in our platform. I don't necessarily think that, like I'm saying, we've gone down the particular path of manager versus employee because we're kind of doing it by human, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, one of the things that we offer in our subscription are live manager trainings,
Yeah.
right? So we hire a subject matter expert um, for manager trainings. And one of the trainings that we have booked for um, the spring is on essentially resilience,
Yeah.
right? And self care in these moments, right? Because you have to have self care if you're holding weight for somebody who has suffered a loss or if you suffered your own loss,
Mm-hmm.
right? You
Exactly.
need to have the tools to be able to work through those moments, whether it's your own or somebody else's or multiple people at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
right? One of our customers, and I won't name them, they have an HR team who is carrying a lot of loss.
Yeah.
And this isn't employees who have suffered a loss in their lives. This is employee loss. They went 14 months. This is an organization of 2,500 people. They went 14 months and lost, on average, during those 14 months, one employee a month
Oh my
for
goodness.
14 months, right? So the weight that they are holding, right? And it's not their specific loss, but that stuff adds up. So when you think about making sure that there's a culture of not just empathy, but and compassion, but also grace and making sure that people have tools to understand like what their options are, to maybe build resilience, to have space to take time, to be able to raise their hand and say, hey, coach, I need out of this game for a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, Starts to come back to culture specifically.
When you were talking about mirroring language really early on
Mm-hmm.
as a practice, the note I made for myself was emotional intelligence. That's so much of what we're talking about. Empathy is obviously
Mm-hmm.
central to that. Emotional intelligence begins with self awareness and being able to key into am I off today? Am I struggling? Because you're
Mm-hmm.
right, even if it's not my loss, it's an employee's loss and I'm trying to navigate, the procedural HR stuff, the helping them figure out what they're doing, worrying
Mm-hmm.
about them. That is a burden as well.
Sure.
And being able to figure out what do I need during this
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Leaders, I think, need to get very clear on that for themselves and recognize that they're modeling that behavior then for employees.
Sure.
You make it
Yeah.
okay to say, this is hard. I need some
Totally.
time. And then,
Yeah.
we talked about like, all right, 2019 and then 2020, everything went
Mm-hmm.
upside down. Another consideration that I want to see if we can address with some fullness is beyond the individual. That
Mm-hmm.
we all know, all of us in the workplace right now have experienced big shared kind of universal grief and loss.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, that will continue. That is the way of our
Mm-hmm.
world. There needs to be, I think, in every leader's practice, an approach to the grief that we just carry with us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a way to monitor, measure, and then address when the weight of shared grief, whether it's something like the pandemic has totally changed everything,
Mm-hmm.
or the economy is rough and we're having layoffs, or any of the many things that can impact everyone on the team,
Mm-hmm.
how are they continually monitoring and providing the necessary support for that?
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a short answer, but I
Sure.
think it's a thing that I want to have kind of out in the world, that leaders be thinking about the overall emotional and psychological health of your team.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, I can't help you with short answers. Obviously, you've heard me today. I have no short answers.
You and me both,
but
friend.
but what I will say is and you talk about emotional intelligence. You talk about other things that happen. Like, nobody could have planned for a pandemic. I worked for probably, arguably, one of the most compassionate work environments that anybody could ever work in, and it was tough, right? But I bet if you could figure out how to measure it versus the place down the street that's not compassionate, I bet we had an easier time navigating it than they did, because of the culture that was built, the way leadership showed up, acknowledged what was going on, gave space, gave grace, gave resources on a continual basis, right? Had we not had that foundation, who knows what happens to that business, right? So we talked about culture and emotional intelligence. I think all those things, like, it comes back to the foundation of the company, right? The companies that succeeded probably had relatively strong foundations, relatively strong core, right? I think that's probably the case. And so when there are these huge, even if, I think about yesterday, United Healthcare's CEO, shot dead, walking into a conference, right? There's massive ripple effect on that. You can't plan. Somebody actually DM'd me and was like, "Hey, how would you plan for this?" Well, you don't.
No.
Right? You have structures in place to make it a little bit easier, but it's still going to be rough. Like, it's never going to be smooth, right? And I think acknowledging that if you're planning for 95% of life, and recognize that 5% of something could happen and completely create upheaval, but that upheaval, because we're prepared for the other 95%, that upheaval is going to be tough, but it's going to be probably less tough than it could be, is something to really consider. It's kept in my mind like 4 times now, so I want to say it because I think it is such a shining example of setting expectations. We have an advisor at Bereave. Her name is Ashley Hurd. She is an attorney. She's former head of HR. She runs a company called Manager Method, where she helps train managers, right? One of the things that she said on a podcast that we did with her was that if you set the tone early on with your team, or anytime a new person joins, this team could be 5 people, this team could be 5,000 people, but every time somebody new joins and they are met with, here's how we handle tough things. Here's how we handle, not just talking policy, but like, what does the team do to rally around each other, right? And set the expectation that as a team member on this team, we got your back, right? That not only establishes the foundation, and you have to get a little bit tactical to say, hey, like, we'll pull these people in, we'll pull those people in, we'll cover your work, we'll do these things, right? But that sets the foundation of like, hey, I'm cared for, and it's all right if things go sideways in my life. It's all right if things go sideways from a macro, because we all are thinking the same way. And one of the things that she and I didn't talk about, but one of the things that I've been thinking about is like, you can then hire using that expectation, right? Like, if you join this team,
Yeah.
here's what we expect when life goes sideways.
Mm-hmm.
And do you want this job or not? Knowing
Yes.
that, I just, the foundation of the culture, of who you want the company to be, of who you want people to talk to you outside of that
Mm-hmm.
company. Like, how do you want people to talk about your company, your business, and working for you? You as an employer, your employee brand. Like, if you have strength there, then everything else becomes
Mm-hmm.
probably a little bit easier, or maybe I'll say a little bit less hard.
Yeah. I think that's probably the best way to talk about it, because this stuff isn't easy, but if
Mm-hmm.
we can make it less hard, that's the
Yeah.
best. Um, Something that keeps coming up for me is a phrase that you used very early on in talking about just sitting with people
Mm-hmm.
during this time. And
Mm-hmm.
that reminds me, and I'm not Jewish, so I'm always very careful how I talk about this
Mm-hmm.
so I can be respectful, but the the Jewish practice of sitting shiva with
Yep.
people, I actually believe that is a magnificent model for
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things in life, actually,
Mm-hmm.
but particularly leadership during hard times.
Mm-hmm.
That the work sometimes is just to be present.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to sit with you in this hard
Mm-hmm.
thing, and
Yeah.
we can talk, we can not talk, we can just be side by side. And if you have a culture that enables that supports it, that maybe even demands it because of its standards and its values, and if you have leaders that have a mindset that I am there to be beside my people
Mm-hmm.
in good times and bad,
Mm-hmm.
then we're making this not as hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, totally. That is that practice is a beautiful practice, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a shining example again of even if it's not days,
Yeah.
it can be minutes, and minutes are
Mm-hmm.
powerful, right? There is this uh, just beautiful moment that you can find on YouTube or TikTok, that was shared with me a while ago. I can't remember who shared. I would love to give them credit. It might have been Faith Holloway, in the UK Hospice UK.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a podcaster named Theo Vaughn. I don't know anything about Theo. I don't know what his podcast is about. All I know is that he had this MMA fighter on his podcast, and they're sitting on two separate couches. And this particular MMA fighter has had some really, really deep trauma
Mm-hmm.
throughout his childhood, and that he's wrestled with his entire adult life. And during this podcast, uh, this MMA fighter, right, perceived as this really strong physical person, breaks down and cries.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, like, I don't know how Theo knew to do this, but he says specifically, "It's okay, buddy. I'll just sit here with you. We can just sit here. You don't need to say anything.
Yeah.
I'll just sit here with you." And they wait on this podcast. I get, sorry. This happens a lot, by the way. Sorry.
I
Thank you for
I imagine it
giving me that
does.
space.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, I
just
appreciate.
even with that, like every time I watch it, I shared it with a friend last night, and I was just like, "Oh, here we go again," watching Theo Vaughn. Uh, it's just a beautiful moment between two guys who are probably supposed to be tough and talking about tough things, and it's a very vulnerable moment that I don't know. I think is a great example and can be replicated really, really easily. And like just seeing things like that in the world, I think are easy for us to put out there, easy for us to share, easy for us to put in our platform as examples of what to do versus what not to do. Those are the types of things that I think are possible if we want them to be possible.
I am very grateful for your reaction there, sir.
Sure.
No, I just like you're very real, and I appreciate that. It also makes me think that we also have to take into consideration that in our society and in a number of societies in the modern world, men are discouraged from sharing that type of emotion. You said, like, oh, these big burly men, they're not supposed to be. And that is a problem for us in so many ways. And again, not a question. I don't have an answer. I think it's important to acknowledge that when you're thinking about loss and grief at work, to be sensitive to those types of dynamics. And also on the flip side of that is don't expect that women are going to be the natural caregivers and emotive.
Sure.
And all of
so
that.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just be, as opposed to having to be these things that are not necessarily connected to what we are in reality? But I think that that's part of the grace, the care, the empathy we've been discussing. Is who are you? Who is all of you? And what part of this may be most challenging for you? Are there factors I don't know? And at the end of the day, my role as a leader, but more importantly, as a fellow human, is to sit with you in your grief for a moment.
Sure.
And like you said, it doesn't have to be days. It can be a moment. And it doesn't have to be literal sitting. It's we can just be here for a second.
Sure.
Yeah.
I also do want to say, and this came up recently in conversation. I do want to say that like a lot of what we talk about is kind of like doom and gloom, not because it's death, but it's because like we're just not doing well in handling this in the workplace, right? So I want to be really, really clear that most stories that we hear, whether they are people talking about their workplace or HR leaders coming to us and saying, hey, we don't do a good enough job here. We need to do better. Can you help us? Right. One of our actually our biggest customer took, instead of taking out of, a departmental budget, he's the CEO and took his discretionary budget and bought Bereave with his discretionary budget.
That's wonderful.
Like things like that. There is so much hope wrapped up here, Kate. Like even people who share their stories, and like my inbox, my partner's inbox, like we're flooded with people, strangers, sharing their stories because they want a safe place to tell their story. They want to talk about their person. They want to talk about their experience. They want to give us more motivation, and they don't come to us with, looking for sympathy. They come to us because they have hope that it can be better, and they have hope that we might be a part of that, or our partners might be a part of that, or somebody might be a part of that, and we can be vocal about it for them, right? There is so much hope in being able to grieve better. There's so much hope in being able to just be better leaders and recognize the impact that tough moments in life can take. And it doesn't have to be death. Like I said, it can be caregiving. It can be a lot of things, right? Yeah. A whole host of things.
You didn't get the promotion you wanted. That's a grief.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. You didn't have the life that you thought you were going to be able to live yesterday. That's not going to happen. And now that's gone, and that's tough, right? No matter what it is.
Yeah.
Like just having this basic foundational understanding. But again, I think there's a shift coming. It feels like there's a shift. We see data that there's a shift. We see the signals that there's a shift. And I think that causes us to be extra motivated, extra hopeful. And there's so much to look forward to. At least from our perspective, having these messages and these conversations on a daily basis.
Yeah. From where I sit, which is more observational of that no longer being in-house, I do agree though. And it makes my heart wildly happy to hear lead better, because that's exactly what I want for leaders and for
Sure.
workers, is better leadership. We will never have perfect leadership.
Hmm.
I don't know that we would ever be able to handle it, in fact. But
I don't want perfect leadership, right?
no,
I want I
no,
want I want human leadership.
exactly. So the goal is, are we doing better? And
Hmm.
knowing that, again, this thing that it is inevitable in our lives, it touches all of us, scares some of us, but is part of how we go through the world. Any promise of doing better as a society, but even as individuals, is
Hmm.
it's pretty great. And knowing that
Hmm.
this episode is going to be out at the start of the year, it makes me kind of excited to think what a great way to start 2025, is talking about things are hard, but we're doing better.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, no doubt.
definitely. Great. Well, I know obviously Bereave has a lot of resources. I'm
Mhm.
also curious if there are any other tools or resources that you would recommend to listeners to learn more about
Oh, so many.
dealing with grief at work. If you have anything that you'd like to send me as a recommendation, I can pop that in the show
Yeah,
notes. But
yeah.
anything that you would want to, like, top five, if I can limit you. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll just a big part of what we've done is help consolidate some of the amazing businesses that are
mm-hmm.
out there and making them accessible through Bereave. So we've got all sorts of partners. I would start with, because I do think that the skill of empathy is going to be one of the biggest unlocks for businesses in the next decade, probably beyond that.
Agree.
I do think Liesl Mertes, she's available at lieslmertes.com. I have been through her trainings. I am a better leader. I'm a better human because of her. I still
Yeah.
have loads of work from an empathy perspective, but she is that empathy coach that I referenced, and she works in large group, small group, etc. There's a company called Support Now out of Atlanta, Georgia, Dunwoody to be specific. They are kind of a for supporters, right? You want to support people that are going through a rough time. They offer a free registry.
Mm,
So think like Meal Train, think Caring Bridge, think of those like things together.
okay.
It's a beautiful platform. They're beautiful people, but they also allow for like um, helping with logistics of life, right? So you can kind of raise your hand and say, "Hey, I'll mow your lawn, or I'll take
Okay.
the kids to school, or I'll do these things," and that happens. So that's called Support Now. They're at supportnow.org. There is a company in Utah called Full Circle Aftercare. Uh, there are a few others that are like them. They're the ones that we work with the most right now, but they help people settle estate and uh,
Oh,
will
wow.
will and trust related services. So we didn't talk about productivity, but it typically takes a person an hour a day for 15 months
Yeah.
to settle somebody's estate on average. They can start to chop that down to like 2, 3, 4 months,
Oh, wow.
and it is so cost effective. In our platform, I think it's $400. The service is $400. I think on our website it's 500, but so affordable when it comes to the amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
We really advocate businesses actually sponsor that for their
Mm-hmm.
employees to get so they don't have to worry about that for as long as they would.
Yeah.
Um, I would also uh, I would also highly recommend, um, and this is very specific. There are a couple of things related to children.
Oh, yeah.
Um, Hope Works Here, or Faith's Lodge. It's two separate companies run by the same people, but help in response to child loss. Right, run
Okay.
retreats for families who have lost a child. Experience camps is another one of them. They run camps for bereaved children. We didn't talk about bereaved children today, but it is
No.
it is a significant problem on getting kids on a path to uh, treating helping support bereaved children you can help them get on a path to living a great life, a great adult life, or it can really falter and go the other way.
Yeah.
So experience camps is one of those that I'll mention as well.
And it's a very heavy point, but it's an important one too, that those children may not be on your payroll, but their caregivers are. And the burden of managing your own grief while loving a child going through a similar process can be a nightmare.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Great. Well, sir, I always like to wrap up if there are any kind of final thoughts, big ideas, key takeaways that we've talked about resources.
You don't think I have any additional thoughts, do you?
I want to hear them. Gimme.
Yeah, I think, what I typically leave people with is that this is a choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is a choice to want to do this better. It is a choice to want to work to retain your people. It's a choice to want to pull them close versus pushing them away.
Mm-hmm.
And should businesses make that choice, it really is not that difficult to do.
No.
You just got to have a little bit of heart. You got to have a little bit of guts. And you have to understand that if you choose to push them away, that it does impact your bottom line.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Exactly right. And it's so important. So important. This does not have to be big programs. It does not have to be rewriting the entire handbook. It is, in fact, I think the more elegant, the more simple, the better. The complexity is going to come with the human emotion. Keeping it to the you are cared about, you have support, and you have people that will listen is almost enough. Almost enough. So, thank you so much, Justin. This has been...
thank you, Kate. This was great.
I really appreciated your time. So excited to keep watching the work that you and your colleagues are doing. It's so important.
Well, thank you for that. Appreciate it, and appreciate the support, the interest, and the opportunity to be on your platform.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me in the comfy chairs. If you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and share it with others who are passionate about leading and learning. And don't forget, if you have a question for our new Comfy HQ series, I'd love to hear it. Check out the link in the show notes to submit your question and be part of the conversation. Until next time.